Have you ever had people say to you, you need to build your aerobic base, or you need to build up your aerobic mileage before starting a proper training plan? Or have you ever had that training block where your workouts have gone great but you've fallen well short in your goal race? Well, today we're going to talk all about these crucial points and tell you guys how you can fix them. What is up guys, Andy Forrest, Team Runner here. Welcome back to another video, and today I'm going to be talking all about why your aerobic engine is so important to your long-term running performance. So my goal with today's video is to hopefully answer some of your questions in and around the topic of aerobic base building, aerobic training, and why it's so important to your long-term running performance. This recent training block I've undertaken has really opened my eyes to the benefits of it, and I'm excited to share it with you too. If there's something we don't cover today that you'd love to know the answer to, make sure you drop a comment down below and I'll do my best to get back to you and give you the best answer that I possibly can. But if you're excited for today's video guys, make sure you give it a like, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel for weekly running content, and we'll kickstart by asking the question, what is aerobic training? When it comes to aerobic work, what do we mean and what's the context of it in this bigger picture of our running performance? Well, it's basically nice and easy, nice and light, jogging pace, conversational pace, light breathing, zone 1 up to zone 2, basically up to our aerobic threshold. Now, when we're talking about threshold work here, we're not talking about what you might hear where people are working on their threshold, doing threshold repeats, threshold runs. That's kind of usually referred to more of that anaerobic threshold, top end speed work. We're talking everything below our aerobic threshold. And basically in that zone, or in those zones, we're never going into oxygen debt. We're building up cardiovascular strength and our bodies are becoming more efficient, meaning the heart rate comes down over time and the more we practice in these zones. Now, unless you go to a lab and get your VO2 max tested with also providing your threshold zones and general heart rate zones, it's very difficult to pinpoint exactly where your exact threshold points are. But there are some great running calculators out there where you can put your age in and your maximum heart rate, and it will calculate some zones for you to work in and around. Now, obviously, these are just quite generic. Everyone is individual, everyone is different. I run with people where they're very similar age to me, but their thresholds can be almost 10 beats a minute lower or 5 or 6 higher than mine. So we are all very individual. Now, taking this data that is provided from these calculators and adapting them into your own training, I have over time worked out roughly where my aerobic threshold is. And just as an example, it was telling me that my aerobic threshold is somewhere in the region of 148 to 153. So I used to do a lot of my moderate running in that area. However, what I noticed is every time I tipped over into the 150s, suddenly breathing changed. I felt like I'd tipped over into that next zone, and sort of that feeling of this suddenly isn't as comfortable as it was before meant that I have adapted it so that I've pulled it down from that area to 142 to 147, and suddenly everything feels a heck of a lot better. And that has allowed me to adapt things to work out that I think my aerobic threshold is in and around that late 140s. So how do we incorporate this work into our running training? Well, there's a couple of ways that we can do it. Number one, we can do a specific base building block, which can last anywhere between 6 to 12 weeks, or we can just incorporate it into our general training for what we're training for at the moment, and I'll explain that very shortly. But if we move back to a specific base building block, I think the key thing for me to mention here is a lot of the work is going to be done in that zone 1 and zone 2 area, but it is still really important to keep a bit of a sprinkling of faster work in there, whether that's hill repeats or whether that's tempo runs. I'm not talking full-on workouts, but it is important to keep a bit of top-end work in there just to keep the sharpness with you. But when you look at a decent base building block, you are talking predominant work in and around zone 1 and zone 2. And as I said, that depends, the length of that block can depend on where you're at in your fitness journey. Have you just come off the back of a big race? Have you got some good fitness there? Do you need to do 12 weeks, or do you just need to do 6 weeks to lay a bit more of a foundation ready for your next training block? Or are you new to running and you want to start back, or you've come back from a big injury and you're looking to just keep things nice and easy, nice and relaxed? That then might lend itself more to doing a longer 12-week block. In terms of if you want to incorporate it into your current training, I think the best advice for that is when you've got those easy and moderate runs penciled into your training, make sure that you really do stick to those zones and you don't get carried away. It's something that I've definitely learned in this training block, has helped me massively feel so much stronger and feel so much fitter, because I've really been a lot more disciplined than I usually have, not got carried away with my moderate runs and certainly not got carried away with my easy runs, meaning I'm fresher for those workouts in that week. So there's a couple of ways we can do it in terms of that style. We've just got to be really disciplined when we're working it into our current training, but in terms of a base building block, it can really set you up for a good future training plan. So why would this affect your race performance? Well, it all comes down to speed endurance itself, and a lot of that speed endurance is built up with speed endurance workouts, but also coupled with a lot of aerobic work. So if you think of it this way, and I actually use this analogy in a recent video, effectively if you're laying down a lot of speed work and a lot of zone 3 and zone 4 work without too much zone 1 and zone 2, then what you're doing is you're laying the bricks of a house, but you're not really putting the cement in to stick the bricks together. Although it's called foundational work, base building, you're laying the foundations. You hear that a lot. I like to think of it more as that plus the cement in between the bricks, because I've been in a situation where I've put in some really good fast training. I felt like I'm in really good shape over those workouts, but when the time comes to hold that pace over a longer period of time, my body just cannot handle it, and that all comes down to a lack of aerobic fitness and aerobic work. So ultimately, if you're feeling in really good shape during a training block and you go back and revisit that training block, have a look through to think, well, I was training so well, but the race performance just didn't reflect what I could do. Have a look at how you were training. Did you find that maybe on some of those easy runs you were pushing it a bit too fast? On some of those moderate runs, steady runs, some people call them, were you really dipping into that zone 3 rather than zone 2? Did you lay that foundation before you started that speed block? So how can we prevent this from happening in the future? Well, as I just alluded to with those couple of examples, we can do either a dedicated base building block, 6 to 12 weeks worth, or we can basically be really disciplined in our training plans and really make sure those easy runs are easy and those moderate or steady runs are kept in that zone 2. In terms of the base building blocks, sometimes a lot of people find this useful, and I've done this before, and there is a video on the channel of me doing a 6-week base building block. I've gone through all my training, shared it all on Strava, and I found it really useful leading into a future training block. So as a good example, if you're training for a spring or an autumn marathon, you might want to consider a 6-week base building block just before the start of that training, or just leading into Christmas before turning to that spring marathon, just to lay those foundations ready for what you're about to put on top. And if you don't want to dedicate specific time to it, but want to make sure you're getting in a good amount of aerobic work each week, following the 80-20 rule will really help you. Or if you are a little bit more like me and you do a lot more specific training, so you're not quite on that 80-20 balance and you like specificity, as I said, that's more like me, then making sure those easy and zone 2 runs, moderate runs, are kept exactly where they should be. So there we go, those are my thoughts on aerobic work and why it's so important for your long-term running performance. As I said, I feel comfortable talking about this topic because it's a situation, or all the situations I've mentioned today, something that I have been through myself and can express to you guys. I hope it resonates with you in some way, and if it does, as I said earlier, make sure you leave a comment below and let me know your thoughts on the whole aerobic work and how your training balance is. Do you incorporate a lot of aerobic work, or do you do a little bit too much faster stuff and sometimes find that aerobic work is lacking from your plan? Let me know in the comments below. Let's get that discussion going. And once again, guys, thank you so much for sticking around to the end of the video. If you found this one useful, make sure you check out these other couple of videos that I'm putting up on the end screen. They'll hopefully help you run a faster marathon and get you a stronger runner. As for today, I appreciate your support, guys. If you enjoyed the video, please do give it a like, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel for weekly running content, and as always, I'll see you on the next one. Until then.